Fine, right, at the back as well? Can you hear me fine? Okay, super. So thanks for the introduction, and he did, of course, ask me to start off in comparison, right? So this is my 4th year here in STC, very, very excited to be here again. Last year, compared to last year specifically, right, I think this year's turnaround is much, much better. Last year it was unfortunate with the Chennai floods and the situation in Tamil Nadu. I think over 100 people, first of all, couldn't show up last year. So firstly, turnaround has been great. I think in terms of topics, it's exciting to see a lot more practitioner topics. Hari Babu and others may also agree, right, who've been here year on year. A lot more practitioner topics, a lot more in line with not just the core functional testing, but also the non-functional areas. So very exciting to see topics around performance, accessibility, security. So that's nice to see as well, where topics are chosen in line with what the industry really needs. So that's been a great going in terms of the conference. With that, we will get started. In fact, I was sharing a light moment with Pradeep. The topic is, it's all about prioritization at the end of the day. Is that why you gave me an end of the day session? Right? That's what I was just sharing a joke with him. But that said, nevertheless, see, prioritization is something we always take for granted, right? It's a very simple word. We've all known, you go to a kid, the kid is going to have that particular word in his or her dictionary saying, I know what prioritization means. But the reason I've chosen this to come here and talk to you all is conscious prioritization is very, very important in the industry today. No matter which domain, which discipline we belong to, more so specific for software testers. So we'll start off with a few core principles on prioritization. Again, you may think, what's new? There are some exciting analogies, exciting strategies to take up your prioritization. So we'll look at those. We'll then quickly jump into software testing, specifically what are the core buckets in which prioritization can happen in software testing, and an impression of our priorities. Essentially, what we do is a reflection of the way we prioritize the whole thing. And this is exactly what Dallin Oaks, he's a religious leader, he also talks about it saying, desires drive our priorities drive our choices, and choices drive our actions. Very powerful statement, right? So just think about it, DPCA, desires, priorities, choices, and actions. So when we look at someone and say, oh, this particular individual is really successful, I know success is a very subjective term, but it's just not a situation of that person being competent and that person having the right opportunity, but I think equally important is the right prioritization that individual has done in his or her life. So if someone were to come and say, hey, I'm really busy, I just do not have time for a certain task, I think it's just not a priority for the individual. So keep this core thing in mind when you think about what prioritization is all about. So moving on, let's define prioritization here. Any quick takers out here? What is prioritization? Any definition that comes to your mind? Anything at all? No looking online first. Sorry? Perfect. That's the right keyword right there. So prioritization is nothing but first things first, right? So a set of things that we've got to work on, stack ranking them based on their urgency and importance. So these are two keywords I want you all to keep in mind, saying what is the urgency, what is the importance. And when I say urgency, it is associated with timeline, and importance is associated with impact. So to give you an example out here, let's say our utility bill is due today. And so today I have to pay my utility bill. Obviously it's a very urgent task because there is a certain deadline or a timeline associated with it. What if I do not pay my utility bill by today? I'll pay it tomorrow with, say, a late fee. So is it really important? Probably not. But let's say you waited that entire penalty period, and by today, I've got to pay my bill, failing which my connection is going to be yanked off. At that particular point in time, the impact also comes in. So it becomes a task which is both urgent and important. Or let's say in our current analogy, the demonetization scheme, right? So I've already reached December 31st. I've got to exchange my old currency or deposit it, failing which I lose the value of it. So the task has all of a sudden become both urgent and important. So anytime you take up anything for prioritization, keep this in mind, because tasks can be urgent but not important, important but not urgent, both important and urgent, neither important nor urgent. When you have this sort of a matrix in mind, prioritization is going to be so much easier. Moving on, before we come into specifically software testing, we'll discuss a few quick strategies. So when I say strategies out here, interestingly, you will find there are a lot of examples that have been quoted by women leaders, so no gender discrimination out here. It so happens, in fact, there is an interesting study as well, that women are better at multitasking than men. So probably that's why, all these strategies have been proposed by them. So the first one by Indra Nooyi. She is, as we all know, the head of the PepsiCo group of industries. She says coping mechanism is her style of prioritization. To give you an example here, she talks about how, earlier in the years when her kids were young and she was growing up the corporate ladder, every Wednesday there was a coffee meeting with moms at the kids' school. So she says, how on earth am I going to be able to go for those meetings every Wednesday? So the kids would come back and complain saying all these moms were there but you weren't there. So the first few weeks she would be extremely guilty, but gradually she developed this coping mechanism where what she would do is before the kids come unto her, she would have done her homework as to which other moms did not attend the coffee meeting. So when the kids came up to her saying all these moms were there, she would say, really? These moms were not there. So that was her coping style of mechanism to basically prioritize her tasks. The second one out here is procrastination. Julie Larson Green, she heads the customer experience at Microsoft. So she says procrastination is her style of prioritization simply by pushing a task till the very end until it becomes both urgent and important. Now, I'm not a personal believer in this. I don't burn midnight oil. But I think that works really well for some people. So that is one style. Optimization, we all as software testers definitely use this in varied ways. That's a great style of prioritization. Other things based on what motivates you, right? Hardest first, shortest first, quickest first, fastest first. Whatever motivates you, that could be your style. But this last one is something that I again want you all to watch out for. This has been mentioned by Adrian. She heads the human resources at Starbucks. She says the power of your yes is only as strong as the power of your no. I think it's a very important statement. I've heard this personally from several clients, especially outside India, where they always say that we Indians, for the fear of wanting to say no, not wanting to say no, we say yes. And finally, we struggle at the very end. So it is completely okay to say no with the justified reasons, because that helps us prioritize what is on our plate. So keep this in mind, that the power of our yes is only as strong as the power of our no. So with this, we'll move on now specifically to software testing. Why is prioritization important for us as software testers, and what are the varied buckets? So typically when we look at prioritization, right, what is the first thing that comes into our mind? Defect management associated priorities. What is a priority? What is the severity of the bug? But there is so much more for software testers, primarily because today we are working with complex products, we're working with complex technologies, increasingly being those end user representatives. I think we've heard enough yesterday and today in terms of keynotes as well, how there is no left remaining in the shift left, how the shift right has also been taken up. Is it more of a shift up and a shift down kind of a thing? There is just so much happening on the tester's plate. So there is no clearly defined syllabus. Obviously, there's not going to be one such thing saying this is what has to be done by a tester, say in a 40 or a 50-hour week. So it is on our overall, requirement that we've got to prioritize. And I think that aligns with the theme of the conference as well this year. If we've got to manage the present and look forward and get ready for the future, I really think prioritization is that key. So we'll now look at 4 specific buckets for prioritization for software testers. Again, I'm not saying this is an exhaustive set, but to me, this comes across as top of the list, saying if we were to prioritize under these 4 buckets, we are ready enough, well enough to face that, managing the present and looking into the future. So what are those 4 buckets? Firstly, prioritization at a people level, at a process level, at an activity level, at a communication level. So we'll look at each one of these in greater detail. So firstly, at a people level, the tester today probably has the most number of interaction points, most number of touch points in the team. Be it a developer, be it a designer, build engineer, operations, end user, business people, we have the most number of interaction points. And I'm sure several of you here would know Ajay Balmurugadas. He made an interesting presentation earlier this year in Pune on 50 ways to improve the developer-tester communication. Great presentation. I think that becomes our number one priority. If you were to ask, of the varied people contacts we were to have, which is that number one contact that I really need to prioritize, it is with that of the developer. Now from an organization level, I think building a subject matter expertise is very, very important. Prioritize that high. Focus on building subject matter experts, not just in the functional areas, but non-functional areas as well. Performance testers, security testers, accessibility testers. But more importantly, even if we have this SME pool, what is happening is that we do not prioritize allocation of the testers at the right time. That is something we certainly need to focus on, because we all focus on very short dynamic projects of late. To give you an example here, so we at QA Infotech, we work on a bunch of very small projects. You know, there are projects coming in from the clients which are often very short-natured, as in 2 weeks, 3 weeks kind of a time frame. How is it that we are able to guarantee the same testers when the same project comes back to us? Now, this is easier said than done. Having that SME pool, but more importantly, having a protocol that when a project for which I am an SME on comes in, I will definitely be allocated to that project. When that project is not there, it is okay for me to be allocated as a supplemental tester on any other project, but that particular project, make it a priority that this person is allocated. When all of this is done, right, when the interactions are focused on, when the right amount of investment is made in building that SME pool and allocation of that SME pool, automatically what happens is the tester is being groomed. The tester feels good and is able to contribute a lot more back to the organization because they get that feeling that they are number one in the organization. So at a people level, I think on a priority, these are things that we need to focus on. At a process level, this is something I've spoken in the earlier STCs as well. I have personally been bitten myself, with the level of documentation. I've worked on projects where I have done the test strategy running into several pages, coming back a few months later where the value was questioned. This was earlier on, say, I think about 2004, 2005 in my overall career span, where we were questioned saying, why did we have to go into this level of documentation? This level of detail, was it really required in the test strategy? Equally so, today I think what is becoming a problem is really, really less documentation. I was in a company in Chennai a couple of weeks back for a quality consulting auditing engagement. One of the main concerns coming from the testers on the ground was that there was hardly any documentation. Communication was falling through the cracks. The connect with the business analyst was falling through the cracks. They just purely went with lack of documentation, took it to the T. So this at a process level, making sure the right balance in documentation is achieved should definitely be a number one priority. At an optimization level, we've heard of a number of optimization stories in the last couple of days. Optimization at a platform level, at a device level, at an operating system level. Arun spoke about optimal logging this morning. So definitely look for optimization. That is going to help with your overall prioritization. To give you a couple of examples here, we work on a number of mobile app testing. So prioritization at that level has a few protocols that we follow. For instance, things like functional issues are more OS dependent. UI issues are more screen resolution dependent. Have protocols similar to these which are going to help you prioritize your entire test effort. Again, going back to this organization that I was there in a couple of weeks back, I was shocked to see that there was no regression test suite. Anytime a regression had to be done, the full test pass would be run. So that was really like a setback for me, saying, hey, where are we today in terms of even understanding what has to be executed? Absolutely no prioritization done. All test cases are being executed every time a defect is being fixed and coming in. So define your protocols to basically help you arrive at the right test suites itself. And finally, prioritize on innovation in processes. A couple of years back, this was my topic in STC, 5 quick bites to innovate in software testing. That continues to be the need of the day. Back then I spoke about how Google sets aside 20% of its time for every employee to innovate. Any one quick raise of hands out here, is there any such definition that's happening in your organization for innovation? Time that is set aside? Excellent, great to see quite a few hands going up out there. So again, it's no magic number, right? Google is able to set aside 20%, which is fine. But prioritize to have innovation as a core thing happening in the organization, because that is how we are going to be able to manage the present and look into the future. To give you an example here for innovation, we are a strong believer in exploratory testing, in crowdsourced testing. So for instance, we have this platform called bugmoney.com, and this is something that we leverage every time a crowdsourced test effort happens. So these could be small ways. Again, today we are nowhere close to even selling this platform. Although it's ready to be sold, we are not doing it because that is not the intention. Our intention is basically to allow employees to use these and further innovate within the organization. So certainly push for innovation to be top on your priority at a process level. At an activity level, right, combining test efforts wherever possible. This is also something where I noticed 2 or 3 speakers talking about yesterday. The one thing is we still seem to follow sort of that sequential approach of first taking up functional testing, then having non-functional testing coming in. In fact, one of the arguments yesterday was the person was talking about not using the word non-functional testing. He wanted it to be used as quality attributes. However we call it, the one thing to remember here is combine test efforts wherever possible. Last year we had presented on this in a couple of sessions where Selenium functional test scripts can be leveraged for non-functional areas such as accessibility, security as well, with the right frameworks in place. So if we were to do that, non-functional testing also comes in much earlier in the game. We're able to save time and also incorporate non-functional testing in the entire set of efforts. Automation, no-brainer. Everyone is moving into the automation space for the right reasons. Manual testers are also coming in, but prioritize here to make sure frameworks are simple, maintainable, scalable, and usable by one and all. Srini definitely speaks about it in most of his sessions. I think last year your session was on this, right? Automation. Yeah. So definitely as organizations are moving on, again, this company that I went to had zero automation, and for everything they basically went with an external vendor, and they were very, very basic in terms of, how do I embrace sequentially first doing functional, then moving into non-functional space. How do I do an automation framework that only automation engineers can focus on? So let's basically shed any such myths to help ensure our automation frameworks become really simple. Let that be top of our priority, basically enhancing productivity and also focusing on the right balance between functional and non-functional testing. At a communication level, right? So we spoke about it at a people level, at a process level, at an activity level. But at a communication level, there's quite a bit of an overlap here between communication and people. Regardless, I'm keeping it as a separate category given its importance. So this study, there's one study that talks about 25% of our time that goes into email communication on a daily basis, whether it is emails being composed, processed, whatever we do with it. So if it's going to be that 1/4 of a chunk that goes into communication, which is absolutely very, very important, but think about all the other loss of things happening on the tester's plate. Junior level testers in this company, again, I'm picking all of these references from this recent company because that's as fresh as a couple of weeks old. Junior testers, people with 1-2 years of experience, came up saying, hey Rajini, we spend a lot of time on communication every day. Unwanted meetings continue to happen. This is pulling down our productivity. I'm a strong believer in in-person meetings, but definitely leverage virtual meetings, tools such as Slack, derive that right balance to make sure communication is productive. This should definitely be one of our top priorities as software testers. So overall, I wanted to give this message to you all that prioritization is important at the end of the day, starting off with understanding what is the meaning of prioritization, how it is first things first, understand the flow of it, of desires, priorities, choices, and actions, understand the various strategies that help us prioritize. Prioritization is the key for us as software testers today. Who is it? One of the speakers yesterday was talking about how we continue to take important decisions without even realizing that they're important decisions. So I think that is where conscious prioritization comes in. But before that, here again, one last point, sorry for missing this one. I'm not going to go into the details of this one. This is a blog that James Buck had promoted a couple of years back on the 7 different types of testers. And of which, one of the main types that he talks about is the social tester. Increasingly, we are all social testers. This is a tester who collaborates because collaboration is the need of the day. Again, we spoke about how we have the most number of interaction or touch points. So that social element of a tester cannot be taken away from us, but which means if that has to happen, communication balance has to be prioritized high. Because as per this study that you see out here of testers who were surveyed, they talk about how the social connect that they have is what is really helping them really stay, survive as well as thrive as a tester. So whether it is in terms of continuous activities that we do, or in terms of learning for, what next, whether it is on social media, whether it is interactions through other people. So definitely prioritize for all of these, because when this happens, what is resulting is that there is a conscious prioritization. So that is that main message that I want to leave you all with. Like, understand the urgency, which is the timeline, and the importance, which is the impact. Because when these two come in together, you're able to consciously prioritize. And with that, one last story out here. This is something that we all know, but I'm just going to reiterate this in the context of the topic here today. This is the philosophy professor who comes in, the jar of life story. How many of you have heard of it? Okay, few of you out here. So this philosophy professor comes into class and he brings in a jar and a bunch of things that he wants to throw into the jar. So he first starts off with these larger pebbles that he throws into the jar. And he asks his students, is the jar full? And the students say, yes, the jar is full. What he does next is he brings in smaller pebbles and he puts them into the jar again. And the smaller pebbles are able to occupy the remaining spaces in the jar. The students are, of course, they're surprised. But they say, yes, it's full again. There is no more room for you for anything else. He then brings in sand. He pours sand and it percolates into all of the other remaining spaces. The students again say, okay, this is the last time we give up. There is certainly no more space in this jar. He brings in water and he pours water and it is basically absorbed into the rest of the space. So the professor basically wanting to explain the hierarchy of needs in one's life, right? Where does family, health, job, everything fits in? He brings in this example saying if we were to first fill the jar with water, we are not going to have space for the others. But if we determine what our priorities are and then go in that right order, the jar is going to take the right spacing. This holds equally good for us as software testers today. We have n number of things to achieve. The portfolio is just too huge. The space is just too huge. But if we were to pick our priorities and probably not start with water first, it is going to really help us determine the right set of things that we've got to do, both for ourselves as well as for the product that we work on. One of the students finally gets up and asks, this is the variant of the story basically, where the professor, instead of water, he brings in wine to pour in. So the student asks, what is that wine for? So the professor says, however busy you may be, again I'll take out the word busy, however full your task list may be, you always have a time for a couple of glasses of wine with a friend. So that is the message that I want to leave you all with today, that however full our task list may be as software testers, it is a fun time to play this role of a software tester. It's a very glorious moment. So let's take it all in to be able to both manage the present and look into the future, but walk away with that message that prioritization is the key that's going to be able to help us achieve this. With that, thank you, and I'll open it up for questions. Always has exciting comments, right? So to share on.
Okay, comment is about the various modes of communication. One thing that I practice myself, and this is part of my New Year message to my team every year when I conduct the team meeting is communicate in this order. Wherever possible, face-to-face first. If you can't do face-to-face, then see if you can pick up the phone and talk. If you can't talk, see if you can ping in communicator. If you don't have communicator, the person not available in any of the three, then drop a mail. So we do in this order, but most of the time our job is that we drop the mail first. The most ineffective way of communicating is email.
Totally.
This is a message to everyone. And if you want to communicate effectively, email should be your last tool. And use it as a tool to kind of put down the agreements. Don't start a question or a debate in the mail. It will not work.
Totally. I'll to add to that, right, I'll give you an example as well. One of my friends, when I was back in Seattle, so we had this coordination thing that used to happen, right? So she, myself, a few others were all these project managers, project coordinators sitting in the US, whereas the teams would be out here. She just had this style where as she was writing, she would highlight a few words and call them out in capitalization. She just did not mean anything. So she would say, please do not do this, and the team would take absolute offense to it out here because they just do not know her. They just do not know what is the background with which she was writing. So I completely agree with him that face-to-face helps solve a lot of things. But that said, also draw the balance to figure out is the face-to-face, because there are ways where face-to-face meetings can be ineffective too. So continuously keep a check on that as well to make sure that is effective. End of the day, productivity is what matters. Am I getting that value out of the meeting that is actually intended for? Any other questions?
Yeah. Thanks for the nice, insightful session. My question is, I agree and understand that priority is very important. And now everybody is moving towards agile, and everybody needs an agility and adapt to the changes and all. So my question is, many times a lot of priority changes in the way we work in terms of changes in the requirement, change in the feature. A lot of changes happen over the period of time. Maybe what we decide in the beginning of the our agile journey, maybe after 2 or 3 sprint, things might change. So how we need to cope up with, because we prioritize something in the beginning and the priorities are getting changed from the different direction.
Certainly, all of you heard his question, right? In terms of in today's agile environment with how priorities keep changing themselves, how do we manage that? See, firstly, I think the answer is in the question itself. So prioritization, reprioritization, being able to nimbly handle the changes is also what prioritization is going to help you achieve. But I'll tell you how, right? This is not a charter just for us as software testers. Prioritization has to be the key for everyone else as well, and which is where we are prioritizing communication high up. If we are all able to get together and communicate, to revisit to see if this is going to make sense, is this going to really bring in value to end users? So that kind of a communication held up in prioritization, and everyone making sure prioritization happens within their own buckets, is going to be so much more possible. This is my take.
Questions?
Yes. Hey, Prashant.
It's more kind of a debate. When it comes
I'm not able
to
hear clearly. I think, yeah.
When he says that he is busy, and when a person, he need to prioritize things, there are 2 things over here. So I can't say that the person who says that he is very busy, he already prioritized his things. And based on that, he is saying that he is busy. but his real intention is not to say that he's busy. So in that case, I can't say that the person who said busy is wrong, and person who did not prioritize is also wrong.
Okay, good question. See, but the thing is, however busy, or again I'll go back to saying however full that person's plate may already be, which is where that person should now consciously look at the urgency and the importance. If what you are going to him with is really urgent, is really important, but again, it may be urgent and important to you, but not to him, right? It has to be looked at from the other angle as well. If it is equally urgent and important for him, there will be a realignment that happens. It will fit into the overall set of things. So if you think that that is really important, not just from your angle, but also from his angle, I think the onus is on this person who's reaching out. The onus is on you to explain why this is so urgent and so important, so that it figures out in his priority set of things.
But the person is already prioritized, that's why he said he's busy.
But it's not a static thing, right? It's not that once you prioritize, it's set in stone. It can be revisited because we just do not know what's coming up, right? That's the same agility and nimbleness related question that he just asked. So again, this is going to help you manage what is on your plate, but that does not mean that I've defined it, there ends it. I will not change it at all. Prioritization is going to help you adapt to the change much better.
Okay. As a person, I never said no
You've never said no?
for anything.
Please revisit now to say no.
Okay, one last question.
Hurt somebody else, because from our priorities, someone else is going to get hurt.
Very interesting question. Going into the softer aspects of, well, I'd be happy to talk to you in detail. This is something that is not going, especially if someone is just starting off, right, in the career or earlier on, he or she is going to have that hesitation. Hey, how am I going to be able to handle this? This is not a magic thing that's going to come overnight. It's going to come in over the years, but which is where the request is consciously prioritize. Just do not prioritize, but consciously prioritize. And if this message can be received by everyone in the organization, at the end of the day, it's prioritization for all of us, then he or she who's coming to reach out to you is going to understand the context of where you come from. Yeah? Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Rajini.
And, with
That was a very insightful presentation. A lot of priorities to be learned. Okay, the next presenter, the next keynote speaker